I'm Marty Stouffer. The whitebark pine is a fascinating example of an evergreen tree's ability to survive almost anywhere. When ancient forests retreated, the whitebark was left stranded on high mountain slopes, where violent wind and the sterile ground made it difficult for any tree to grow. It's mid-September, and inside these sticky, sap-covered cones, the seeds are ripe, ready for harvest by a whole variety of wildlife species. This tree is able to cling to a meager existence on wind-swept rock, but only with the help of this bird, the Clark's nutcracker. Though the whitebark is a strong tree, it cannot reproduce itself without the help of the nutcracker. And in a marvelous symbiotic relationship, the nutcracker cannot raise its young without the nutritious seeds of the pine. Join me as we learn about this partnership and about all the other creatures which rely on the whitebark. Most of us have never seen a whitebark pine. At elevations above 5,000 feet, they remain hidden in the remote northern Rockies. Having little commercial value, they've never even been studied much. Unlike most other trees, the whitebark has seeds which lack a membrane wing that grants mobility to escape and reproduce on their own. The whitebark is distinguished by its clusters of 5 needles. Unlike its white pine cousins, only the whitebark needs the help of the Clark's nutcracker to reproduce. Ripened pine seeds are the nutcracker's primary food. Some are eaten on the spot, but most are popped into an expandable pouch below the bird's tongue. Seeds are then cached. They'll be retrieved in the winter or next spring. An industrious nutcracker may transport and plant 30,000 whitebark seeds in one season. As autumn advances, competition is keen for the tasty pine nut. A nuthatch hides some in the crevice of a branch. Its stashing, however, does not go unnoticed. Smaller than the eastern chipmunk, the western least chipmunk vies for the nutritious crop. Although the martin prefers meat, it also can't resist whitebark seeds. Even the snags and hollow logs of dead whitebarks play a role. They provide protection for the red squirrel's midden. Middens are stored food caches that can reach large proportions, building up over several squirrel generations. They often contain a maze of tunnels, extending far below the surface. A key character in whitebark country, the red squirrel competes with the nutcracker. In fact, it's so closely associated with evergreen forests that it's often called pine squirrel. Likewise, the martin is sometimes known as pine martin. Although it steals seeds from the squirrel's cache, the martin would prefer to eat the squirrel itself. In nature's efficient system, nothing goes to waste. The damp midden keeps seeds secure within the cone for long periods. They can be devoured later at leisure. But there's little time to rest, especially when a hungry marten enters the squirrel's territory. The marten picks up the squirrel's scent. A major concern for all would-be seed eaters is the sticky sap covering the cone, which is potentially deadly if it gets on fur or feathers. Yet another creature enters the whitebark grove. By late September, the mighty grizzly bear is feeding in earnest, constantly foraging to build a thick layer of fat. Grizzlies are the ultimate predators, but their diet is omnivorous, and they eat vegetation more often than flesh. The average grizzly weighs around 500 pounds, but some reach 1,000 pounds or more. They can put on 200 pounds in a plentiful foraging season. Bears are very short-sighted and must rely on their keen sense of smell. This female grizzly is searching for a squirrel's midden full of rich pine seeds. The bear picks up the scent of the cache. Just before going into hibernation, the grizzly's diet is especially dependent upon the calorie-packed seeds of the whitebark. They are also laden with estrogen. For centuries, Native Americans consumed them as a means of birth control. The grizzly's powerful front claws can break open the tight pine cones if there aren't enough shelled seeds available. Ever the forest sentinel, the noisy squirrel's chatter will often signal to a bear that a pine cone midden is nearby. Bears mate in July, but the fertilized egg does not begin to grow in utero until the female enters her den in November. A large reserve of fat is needed to see her and her cubs through until spring. Given enough pine seeds in fall, the grizzly emerges healthier in spring. Without this rich food source, grizzlies may be forced to encroach on human populations. The squirrel can only wait until the bear's had her fill. Thanks to the busy squirrel's storage effort and the whitebark seeds, grizzlies can thrive in our high country. Each autumn, the Clark's Nutcracker plays the key role in reforesting whitebark. Its sublingual pouch is filled with up to 100 seeds before the bird flaps away to an open area. An unwitting conservationist, it buries up to 15 seeds in each hole, careful to cover them afterward. With an uncanny sense of finding the stashes, the Nutcracker may dine on the cached seeds throughout the winter. Long, harsh winters curtail the whitebark's growth. A limb the size of a straw can represent 50 years of struggle. Living 200 to 1,000 years, whitebarks will grow 100 feet tall in a valley forest, or remain a gnarled shrub whipped by fierce subalpine winds. When there's an ample supply of whitebark cones, there's no need for the Clark's Nutcracker to migrate. Much of their diet comes from whitebark seeds. Some 20,000 pine seeds are needed per Nutcracker to live through the winter. And if the Nutcracker breeds, an additional 5,000 seeds are needed for each offspring. Porcupine also feed on whitebark. Their razor-sharp teeth chisel away the outer bark, or phloem. If a porcupine totally severs the phloem, the tree will die. Whitebarks represent about 15% of the trees in the forests where they're found. Not only crucial to the food chain, they're important in preventing erosion on steep terrain. Life is a daily struggle in the frozen whiteness. In desperation, the snowshoe hare may eat the bark, but it prefers the whitebark's needles and buds. Shyest of all hares, it rests by day, patiently awaiting spring. Unable to relocate all the cached seeds, the bird leaves many to germinate and sprout. This assures whitebark reforestation and food for future Nutcracker generations. Instinctively, it stores the seeds on south-facing or wind-swept slopes where winter first loosens its grip. There is just one nesting per year. Most of the birds mate for life. Male and female share incubation duties, typically sitting on 2 or 3 pale green eggs for about 18 days until they hatch. Both parents feed their fledglings whitebark seeds. Although the young leave the nest in about 4 weeks, the parents will continue to feed them for another 6 weeks, until early summer. Today's whitebark stands were cached by previous Nutcracker generations. A lack of resin accounts for the tree's flexibility and its name. Without the darkening resin, the bark remains white. As winter slowly gives way to spring, life takes on a new surge of energy. Hungrier than ever, the grizzly begins a summer of foraging that will cover a range of up to 150 square miles. The grizzly starts by digging for tubers and tender shoots. As the season progresses, other vegetation, insects, burrowing animals, decaying carcasses, and berries make up its diet. Whether hungry or just playful, the grizzly's tastes do include fresh squirrel. Ounce for ounce, the red squirrel must be the pluckiest species in the forest. Where food is concerned, grizzlies never forget and return year after year, always at the right time. Unlike black bears, grizzlies do not climb trees. Their food supply must be procured on the ground. Having lost out on a squirrel lunch, this bear must settle for finding grubs and ants in a rotten whitebark log. Springtime brings added responsibilities. In February, this female squirrel mated. and she has already given birth to a litter of young in a hollow whitebark. From her nest, an abandoned woodpecker hole, she can monitor intruders. Every forest creature becomes an invader of the feisty red squirrel's turf. Newborn are about 4 inches long, helpless and blind. 2 to 8 babies comprise a litter. The female is receptive to males for only 1 day during her breeding period in late winter. That is the only time she will allow a male in her several-acre territory. In about 10 days, the young grow fine hair, and by 20 days, they're well covered with brown fur. After 27 days, the baby squirrels open their eyes. Clumsy at first, they get busy learning the swift acrobatic maneuvers they'll need for survival. About 1/3 the size of an adult, these young squirrels are at their most vulnerable stage. Predators include hawks, foxes, and various weasels. They continue to nurse throughout much of the summer while learning the ways of the forest. At 8 weeks, the mother weans her litter by simply abandoning the nest. Usually nocturnal, a young porcupine steps shakily into the daylight. No threat to the squirrel, it cannot resist a closer look at this curious little creature. The squirrel's tail is essential for balance, and also lessens the impact of landing and occasional falls. Flicking the tail shows anger or fear. To a curious young squirrel, a family of equally young weasels does not look threatening, but they will by summer's end. Also by summer's end, the mother squirrel will become very aggressive and will banish the noisy youngsters from her home territory. Once self-reliant, they'll learn to defend their own territories. Hardy as it may seem, whitebark populations are dropping dramatically. One major problem is our control of natural fires. Slow-growing whitebark weaken beneath a heavy forest canopy. Dense forests have allowed the mountain pine beetle to ascend to whitebark elevations. They can take over a weakened tree. These pitch eruptions are the whitebark's effort to expel the pest, and it might succeed, but more likely, the beetle will kill the tree. Also recently, there has been a high incidence of blister rust. Cone-bearing branches are often first affected. Blister rust on a tree trunk is followed by a yellowing of the needles. A sapling may not survive the rapidly spreading fungus. We are finally coming to realize that these high mountain ecosystems are a sacred part of our national heritage. It's hard to imagine a tree as an endangered species. Unfortunately, this is the case with the whitebark pine. Like any animal, a tree is a living, breathing life form which needs to mate, reproduce, and eat to survive. The threat to its existence from disease, fire suppression, and certain forestry practices is very real. Yet we have the knowledge to diminish these dangers. It's essential to an entire ecosystem that we act now to protect this unique survivor. In so doing, we will ensure continuation of a natural cycle which benefits us as well as the ancient whitebark. I'm Marty Stouffer. Until next time, enjoy our wild America.